Zombicide Modern, Black Plague, Massive Darkness, Green Horde, Zombicide Invader. All of these games share a similar mechanic. They've got lots and lots of miniatures. And this is a dangerous duality. This is a dangerous place to be because I'm a wargamer and I love miniatures. And I'm also a board gamer that loves miniatures. So these games are just perfect truckloads of miniatures on there. But they also share a number of similar mechanics in that you have cards that spawn zombies, monsters, xenos, whatever we're going to call it, and you're manipulating your characters, your actors, your heroes to complete a mission on there. And of course, dice are involved to complete this mission. So the question, of course, is separating out from the time periods. What series has the best mission structure? And this is stepping back for a moment and looking at other board gaming systems. What we're trying to do, whether it's Ameritrash or Heavy Euro or somewhere in the middle, you're trying to step outside space and time. Not going to get like esoteric here, but that's what we're trying to do. We're creating a simulation. We're creating a narrative. We're sitting down with friends. We're taking time out of our lives to do something cool on the table. And when we have this combination of visuals, presentation, combined with a solid rule set or a rule set that you like to play, that you can enjoy, and you layer over that evocative missions that really pull out the narrative, that is a win. So which in these series, in my opinion, that I'm going to turn over to you guys, has the most ideal mission structure? We start with Zombicide Modern. And as of this podcast, as of right now, I believe we're a couple of months out for the Zombicide Modern relaunch, reboot, that's going to change things on there. So if you're coming to this podcast late or a year from now, who the heck knows, Google Analytics, whatever it's suggesting, take that into account. Zombicide Modern has the weakest mission structure. And that's not really a criticism, and it's not fully fair, because this was the first in a series. This was groundbreaking, a true co-op AI game, battling zombies, spawning tons and tons of zombies on there and working for an objective. The mission structure itself, they were learning. And a couple of the other seasons that followed, things got a little bit better. But essentially, you're running around the board trying to acquire certain items and escape. The mission was very, very linear, often where you start on one side of the board and you progress and make your way to the other side of the board battling zombies. It, in my opinion, even when you take into account the different respawns, the different characters, the different abominations you can put in, the different seasons, that changes the tactics a little bit. That's a little bit of window dressing, makes things a little more interesting visually and tactically, but it gets repetitive pretty fast. And I enjoy Zombicide Modern. A buddy of mine has it fully painted up, ready to go. I love playing it. I do. But in my opinion, just by virtue of being the first, it's the weakest. Parallel would be Hero Quest was the first dungeon crawling game. It would not be fair to compare Hero Quest to Descent or even Hero Quest to Advanced Hero Quest. Anyone first to market is really undertaking a tremendous burden. So then we move along and we get Zombicide Black Plague. I love this setting a lot. Without going on a tangent too much, I've pushed more of it to my archive. Sword and sorcery, fighting things out, a lot of fun, really, really interesting on how it works. The missions here, they are similar to Zombicide Modern in that you have to achieve certain objectives, pick up an X on the table, pick up some supplies, pick up an artifact, make it off the board. But now where things change is the board is not so much start to finish, meaning you start on one side of the table and you got to get to the other side. There are interconnecting vaults, which are essentially entry points and exit points that can take you from one side of the board to the other. And these change things differently in that now as the horde is behind you of zombies, you're like, okay, no big deal. It's behind me. I'm not going back there. but the mission could switch, or you might have to go back there. So there's a lot more of dynamics in the mission, but they're still pretty much find and fetch and replace. Then we move to Zombicide Invader. And I say Zombicide Invader because it is a natural extension of the three. And you would think it would have the best missions out of all of them. Half the missions are really awesome. Half of them, it's just like everything else in the Zombicide franchise, the Zombicide series. I like Invader on a side note because you're fighting aliens and it's sci-fi, and I think that's really unique. One of the different mission structures that Invader has, which really raises the difficulty level tremendously, is where you're escorting civilians or you're escorting scientists. This idea where you're in this facility and Xenos are pouring in everywhere, and not only do you have to escape, but you have to move to opposite points in the facility, pick up these scientists, pick up these Xenos, and make it out on there. And what that kind of does is I find that some of the missions are either really, really simple, go to this point, pick up this prototype weapon, get out of there, go to these 2 points, pick up these objectives, get out of there, start on this side of the board, exit on that side of the board on there. They're solid missions. They build a lot of tension. There's a lot of miniatures on the table. But once you kind of get the unlocks, you know how they're going to play. The escorting the civilians and the scientists, or defend this area and don't let a number of Xenos through because civilians are trying to exit the planet as Xenos take over, it is very challenging. So I feel like this, in terms of a difficulty rating, has the most extreme, easy to hard, which now leaves us to Massive Darkness on there. And this is interesting because Zombicide Modern, Black Plague, Green Horde, and Invader, they follow a similar progression. Massive Darkness kind of shoots off to the side. It kind of sidesteps it. We've got a lot of miniatures. We've got cards that spawn various mobs and roaming monsters. The dice are different. The dice use custom dice with symbols that unlock powers, so there's a lot more diversity, a lot more calculations and tactics you can utilize. But in my opinion, and I wish they had more missions, we always wish they had more, Massive Darkness has the best missions out of all of them, because you're looking at missions where, yes, you have to go in and recover 2 artifacts, and they're randomly spread out at the start of the game, so you don't really know where they are. You know, there are these 4 points. You got to explore 2. You're moving around on the map. But there's also some interesting missions where you're on a timer. You're hunting down certain powerful monsters that are trying to escape from you. And if you don't deal with them fast enough, if they exit the board, you lose. You deal with missions where parts of the dungeon are collapsing. So there's this introduction of a timer in the game. As the dungeon is collapsing, you got to figure out, do I keep moving? Do I linger in this part of the dungeon and loot farm it? Do I skip 2 tiles ahead? And this way the tiles before me are collapsing and I have 4 or 5 turns and I loot those tiles on there. I mean, a lot of tactical decisions to make and see how it plays out. There's also missions where you have to confront boss monsters and open up different parts of the dungeon and different levels. In my opinion, this has the best progression in terms of the first couple of missions are so easy. You're like, really? This is it? And then when you get into the mid-level missions, they're challenging. They're really interesting, not only in mechanics, but in difficulty. And the end-level level missions are the absolute hardest on there. So if I was jumping into the series just based on the missions themselves, my vote would be for Massive Darkness. Now, in closing, as I make my arguments, as I offer my advice here, I should say advice, as we move into Zombicide Reboot Season 2, I expect the missions to be amazing. I mean, at this point, they've really nailed down the plastics. They've nailed down the rules. They've nailed down the production on there. The Kickstarter bling, they understand all that. The missions are where it's going to shine. And we've had multiple game systems out to refine it, to push it. That, more than anything else, has me really, really intrigued to possibly look at Zombicide Modern Part 2, second edition. I'm really not quite sure what we're calling it yet with that. I guess we'll have to wait and see towards the Kickstarter.